Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Jesus is the Key to Reentry. God bless you all. Happy Saturday to you. I'm just glad that you're here and you're tuning in for tonight's episode. I say it every other week that I'm on that this is probably going to be one of the best ones that I had. So I'm just grateful to God to be able to be on and to be able to share. So I want to just encourage you as you come on in. Make sure you just state your name and state where you're from on tonight. So we just glad that you're here. Don't forget, you got to share this podcast for me, okay? So as you coming in, share the podcast, even for replay. Those of you come in and watch replay, make sure you put replay in the chat and still give me the same thing. I do want to say happy graduation to class of 2024. You made it. You did it. Through all the challenges. I can just remember my time in high school and when I said I was ready to get out. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I can go back a little bit. But congratulations to all of you. Congratulations to the parents on tonight as well. We're going to go ahead and get started for tonight. I want to go ahead and just get started, but I'm going to kind of read the bio of my guest on tonight. You've been seeing it as I've been posting it, who it is. But our guest this week is the District Attorney of Richmond County, I think Burke County as well, District Attorney Jared Williams. He's from Augusta, Georgia. He's actually from Augusta, Georgia. He has a law degree from Stetson University College of Law. While in law school, his first job was an unpaid internship at a district attorney's office. All right. He gives God all the glory for everything. And that's one of the things that I love. And he's going to mention the Lord's name. So I'm just happy to have him on tonight. Happy to hear what he has to say and why he believes in second chances. And this tonight is the power of the prosecutors. And as we was coming up with that, God's put people in position. That's why it is so important to vote. Some of us can't vote, but there's been times that we couldn't vote. So you have a chance to vote now because it's important of who you put in office. So without further delay, he won the race again. So he's going into his second term, right? That's the right way to say it. Come on, District Attorney Williams, how are you?
I'm better than I've been in a while.
Well, amen. Welcome to Jesus is the Key to Reentry. I'm just so happy that you're here and that you're going to be able to share with us of the power of the prosecutors. I'm going to show, before I get into that, I want to show a little clip. It's Muriel. You're here from Dublin. Hi. Hi, Mavis. How are you this evening? And Samantha from Charleston, South Carolina. How are you, Samantha? Let me go ahead and just show this little clip real quick. All right.
For the people of Georgia. Next.
So when I make decisions in the courtroom, I'm doing it not just based on what's going to win here today, but what's going to be the best result for our young people on down the line. That's why we created a program where we work with a private business, we work with Goodwill Industries, and we work with Augusta Tech, so that first-time offenders get a job, a career counselor, and their GED, all for free. Why? Because every career criminal I ever saw started out as a first-time offender.
Every career criminal you saw started as a first-time offender. We're going to get into that, but I want to start off with a little bit of icebreakers. All right, I want you to tell everybody what's your favorite movie and why.
That's a tough one. I'm a real fan of Pulp Fiction. That's one of my favorite movies, and I think it's hilarious and really well shot, but also well written. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy writing, and so I appreciate when the writing is good.
Okay.
So I'd have to say that one. Although I'm a movie person, so I've got a lot.
Okay.
Go on for days.
All right, thank you. Share a little known fact about yourself. Give me something. We know you're the DA, but give us something else about yourself.
Little known fact. So everyone sees me, and I'm a public speaker and a public official, and I talk out in public all the time. But what they don't know is that I have what they call imposter syndrome. So even though I've done good things and have been able to accomplish a lot, I'm always the one who's second guessing myself. And so I like to share that, because sometimes people see people doing things and think, I could never do that. And the truth is you just have to get out of your own way.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. All right. I like to start with something that people may not be aware of. And I just recently found out myself that you used to be a school teacher. So you said you was a prosecutor, school teacher, defense lawyer, and not a prosecutor again, right? Did I say it right?
Well, I started out in the DA's office. Like you said, I was an intern. And then when I got licensed to practice law, I started my first job at that office, the office that I now run. And so I got kind of demystified by by prosecution, and how little impact I felt like I was having on people to actually change behavior. And so I was looking for something else to do, just generally. But then I also got challenged by someone I had met in college. I hadn't seen this person in years, and they asked me a question that really stuck in my craw. She asked, what's your biggest regret? And mine was that I hadn't done what I said I would, which is move out of the country, move to a place that spoke primarily Spanish, and try and improve my own language by living there. And so when I told her what my regret was, she said, well, what's stopping you? And I couldn't answer that question. I couldn't answer it satisfactorily. So that was New Year's Eve of 2014. So December 31st, January 1 of 2015, I started making a plan. And by September of that year, I was living abroad. I was living in Spain, and I taught for 2 years in public schools there.
Okay. Was it any particular subject or grade that you would teach?
So in America, we do foreign language kind of backwards. We just give you 1 hour, maybe once a day or just a couple times a week, and hope you learn the language. That's not really how it works. And so over there, what they do is half the school day is taught in the language they're trying to get you to learn. And so I taught English, but I also taught art. I taught history. I taught natural science.
Okay.
So, a variety of subjects.
Okay. Now, the majority of people, like I stated at the beginning too, that we know that you always give God the glory or the credit for everything that's happened. And so my question is, how would you say that you describe your role and responsibility as a DA in society? And what are some of the ethical or moral dilemmas that you may face, still trying to uphold the law and maybe
Sure. So I would say the role is kind of twofold. So one is you have to protect victims, and you do that through prosecution. So we just got a conviction yesterday on a double murder from 2020. And so 2 men went in and killed 2 other men. And we were able to get guilty verdicts and secure justice for that family. The problem with just being happy with that is that the families of those 2 victims are already suffering. Nothing that happens in a courtroom can ever replace the loss of their loved ones. So for me, I believe that you have to also try and be proactive and prevent victims in the first place. And you do that by getting to the kids. You do that by reaching our young people before they pick up that gun or before they join that gang or whatever it may be that's enticing them. Some of it might be before they pick up that syringe. Whatever the issue is, trying to get to them and intercede before they can go down the path that results in them having to come across my desk.
So how do we do it? Because I know now when we was coming up in our times, when you got in trouble in school, okay, you got in trouble in school, they took care of it, okay? Then we got home, they took care of it. And you may get taken care of again when daddy come home later on. But
Mhm.
now it's so much different now. So how do we get those young people? Because it starts as early as kindergarten or first grade, as I was telling you earlier. So what are some things that we can do there? Because a lot of it, the fathers are out of the home. So you think that's a big problem or one of the problems?
So yes, it's definitely one of the problems, and it's one of those things that we can miss some important pieces if we don't break it up. So number one, you're right. It has to happen in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm gonna write this down so I don't lose my train of thought. So you have to have parents who are active and involved in the kid's life. All right,
Mm-hmm.
that's important. But let's not forget that we created a generation that was having no fathers in the home, primarily because men were being locked up for nonviolent offenses, some of which are legal today. And so when I think about it from the eyes of a prosecutor, I have to make sure that when I am deciding that a sentence should be handed down, that someone should go down the road,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm taking into account the ripple effect that that's going to create, not just for the defendant or for the victim, but for the defendant's child, who you could make a convincing argument is also a victim in this.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be responsible in the way that you hand out justice. And I think for a long time, prosecutors weren't very responsible, and they
Okay.
were locking people away for things that there was probably a better way to address the harm. All right, so that's one side of it.
Okay.
But if we're just expecting the criminal justice system, that means police, prosecutors, and prisons to fix our problems, then we're never going to fix the issue, right? Because again, it does go back to the parents, and we need to make sure that parents are held accountable. We need to make sure that they are ensuring that their kids are hitting the milestones that lead to success. So if you talk to most educators, they'll tell you that they're getting kids come in at kindergarten, first grade, that have no education, no academic stimulus at all, right? So they don't know how to read. They've never been read to. They haven't built hardly any of the vocabulary that they're supposed to have built, because those years between the time that you're born and the time that you go to pre-K or kindergarten is lost when mom's at the club or dad's not around and nobody's reading and no one's talking and no one's helping them build that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the struggle that I see, is sometimes we wait until the school gets involved, and then it's the school's problem that the kid's failing. And then when the kid fails out of school, then it's the court's problem. And I think we really need to put our focus, our energy, our efforts, our resources into helping parents parent and making sure that we don't remove parents from homes who can actually be a benefit and a blessing to their kid.
That's right. That is so right. Because we had to read. TV didn't come on until we did our homework. That was a part of our everything thing. But the parents, even me, I look at my situation and me being gone for years from my son's life. But thank God I still had family there that was there with my child to be able to, you continue on, you stay in school, and guess what? They held him responsible while they was being held responsible. So thank you for that. Someone's here saying, I appreciate that you don't throw away people's lives away. The system is not set up for our people to be succeed in. We need more of our people in his position to affect real change. Amen. I
Amen
definitely
to that.
and that's one of the things. And I know, as prosecutors, you have a job. Okay. Like you said, you got to take care of the victims. And I do believe, even though I believe in second chances, even though I criminal justice reform, prisons was designed for a reason. If it wasn't for me going away, I don't think I'll be the person that I am now. Now it took me a little longer. So when do you feel that, or do you ever feel like that person, there's no hope in that person, or this person is a career offender? This is what, do you feel like that person, there's just I'm just going to give them away. We don't give them chance after chance after chance. And, you know.
So if Paul can persecute the church and then end up being an apostle, then it's hard for me to ever say that someone's beyond hope. Now, that being said, sometimes it's too late for me to be able to give them the hope. Okay. So, for instance, if I get a 17-year-old who's pulling on door handles, breaking into cars, I can do the unwise thing and put him into prison, or I can do the smart thing and put him into checks over stripes, where he gets a job, he gets his education, and he gets a career counselor. You know, that makes more sense, right? Mm-hmm. But if that same 17-year-old, instead of pulling on door handles, picks up a gun and takes a life, I believe that he's probably somewhere in him able to change. I just can't take that risk for the community.
Okay.
And, you know, the victim's family is a factor in this, but it's also, I mean, it's the reality is I'm seeing some of these kids come through here with these murder cases, and I don't see any light in their eyes. So I think that there's probably a better system to try and reprogram and change someone's behavior. Mm-hmm. But the tools at my disposal, and that's a whole nother conversation that I'm willing to go down about prison reform. But at least the tools that we have currently at our disposal, there's nothing to help guarantee community safety and behavior change. Mm. And so when certain crimes are committed, if you're violating children, violating women, taking lives, there's really no other option for me but to remove you from the community. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean for that to sound harsh. I mean for it to be matter of fact.
That's right. That's right. Now, I personally know a person, and he was young when the offense was committed. And one of the questions that he has is that he was offered a plea deal. Okay. But he chose to go to trial. And of course, he went to trial and he has a life sentence when he could have got 10 years. Will there ever be a chance he don't exhausted all of his appeals, that he can ever get his plea deal back? Because evidently they felt like he needed 10 years anyway, but because he's young, he think he can do whatever he can do. 23 years later, a different person. Could the prosecutor maybe revisit that because they was going to give him 10 in the first place?
So legally, no. There's no document that I can file. We call it a legal vehicle. There's no vehicle I can get in the car in the court and take through the process to lower his sentence. He can, like you said, file for appeals, motion for new trial, motion for modification of sentence. All of that stuff has to be done within a certain time frame. Mm-hmm. But here's that's the legal side of why no. Here's mm-hmm. the practical side why no.
Okay.
So you hear this person gets offered a plea deal, 10 years. They think 10 years is the right sentence, but then he goes to trial and they're mad at him for going to trial, so they give him life. Mm-hmm. When in reality, what the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the judge are doing during that plea negotiation process is they're measuring risk and they're trying to mitigate risk, because we never know what a jury's going to do. We got a guilty verdict yesterday that very easily could have gone the other way, right? And so it's less about we're mad that you made us try the case. It's more about we determined prior to trial that we had significant risk of loss and offered the lowest thing that we could offer while still doing justice in the case. That's what I imagine that prosecutor was thinking. Mm-hmm. But now that we've seen that we were successful at trial, well, we have the opportunity to get the sentence that we want. And here's the other thing is if he's sentenced to life in prison, then it probably means that his earlier plea deal included a reduction in charge. But if the jury found him guilty of the elevated charge, well, now the judge has no choice but to sentence to life in prison. That's the minimum sentence. Mm-hmm. So people like to vilify the plea process and the plea negotiation process, but I was a defense attorney for a long time. I was a very successful one. And most of my clients, I would say about 95% 5% of my clients came in looking for a plea deal, right? I know I did the thing. I want the best result possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to provide that in a lot of cases. I also represented a man who was charged with 2 offenses they were sex-based offenses.
Mm-hmm.
He was not guilty. I mean, he was innocent. And I say innocent because not guilty is a legal term. I mean, like, he didn't do it.
Okay.
Right? And so I provided evidence to the prosecutor about why they should feel secure that he did not do what he's accused of.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me, instead of giving him 2 back-to-back life sentences, we'll give him 10 years. Well, my client said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to trial. I believe in God. I believe he's going to see he's going to make sure that the right thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to trial, and he risked 2 life sentences. He won. He walked out of that courtroom a free man. But that's the calculus that's going in. And I think I see a comment about people getting railroaded, getting harsher thing. That absolutely happens. I'm not saying that people don't get trial tax.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that we can't always assign the reason why someone got a stiffer sentence after trial just to the trial tax, because the other side of it is, if I, as the prosecutor, don't know who you are, I mean, I never know who the person really is. I know what their attorney tells me about them, and I know what's contained in the case file.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real problem with the process itself, but we'll get into that another time.
Okay.
But if I'm looking at it and I'm saying, this person did this crime and they are remorseful and they are accountable and they are taking accountability for their actions by pleading guilty, there's a benefit for having done that versus going down swing and saying, I didn't do it. Right? Because going to trial is you saying I didn't do it. It's not saying I want a better punishment. It's saying I didn't do it. And so I think that the plea process has been used militaristically. It has been used in a way that is unfair to people. Those things can be true, while at the same time there are good reasons to enter into plea negotiations, and why that process can and is in many cases being used in a fair and responsible manner. I think the popular thing for me to say is plea deals are the devil, but not, so.
And that's the truth, because a lot of them, and even what Samantha was saying, a lot of us, you get tired of sitting in the county jail. All right. You get tired of waiting, and you just want to go ahead and do something. Okay. Because we feel like, okay, it's just harder time in the county jail. Let me go ahead and do it. Or they're saying, or whatever the case, and we go ahead and take it and just take that guilty plea. And now we got that felony because we're just tired of waiting, you know?
And I'll tell you something. So one of so for those who don't know, I ran for this office in 2020, and I was going up against a power structure that saw things a certain way. It was a very conservative, kind of extreme type of prosecution that most people would label as tough on crime. I wouldn't, because they didn't have the numbers to suggest that they were successful. But at least that was the mentality, is go for blood. And so I won the office, and I had to come in and try and bring in a new culture where even after trial, we're not going to just throw the book at someone if it's not the right sentence.
Right.
And so this guy went to trial on a kidnapping with bodily injury. And if you go to trial and you lose on that, the sentence is life. Now, the problem is the bodily injury that was the result of the kidnapping. Well, one, the kidnapping took 10 minutes. Like, the whole criminal episode only lasted 10 minutes. And the injury was like a scrape on the knee, right? So legally, it was charged appropriately, but a life sentence for that was not appropriate. And so one of the biggest kind of early knockdown, drag out fights that I had with my own staff was after trial saying, we're not going to pursue the life sentence. We're going to do what's called a downward departure and sentence him to a lower amount. And that did not make people happy. And but it represented a shift in the culture and how we're going to do things in our circuit. We're not going to just go for blood because you made us try a case. We're not going to go for the highest sentence just because we can. And I remember just how hard and difficult it was to force someone to prosecute that way. But then fast forward, that was in would have been the first half of maybe April or May of 2021. So I remember walking into a trial where one of my attorneys had just won a murder case. And the defendant was younger. And he said, Judge, the maximum sentence is life without parole, but he's X age. We want you to sentence him to the lowest sentence, which is just life in prison. And that I didn't have to tell him that. I didn't tell him that. He made that choice on his own. And that's part of why the fight was worth it in the beginning, was to make sure that we could bring on the new culture. So I'm not saying plea negotiations are always fair. I'm not saying that trial taxes never happen. I'm saying that if you have a prosecutor who cares about the rule of law and also cares about the impact that you have on the community, they're probably doing it in a respectful, healthy, and ethical way.
Okay. All right, let's talk about your Checks Over Stripes program. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So that is my baby. It took so long to get that program off the ground because I come into office and we're still in the midst of COVID, and then they split my circuit off. They take a county out of my circuit, and there's just so many different things, right? And there were other objectives that we had to accomplish. And so I started that process probably in about February or March of 2021. And we launched that program in February of 2024. It took a long time, to build this kind of new alternative sentencing structure. So basically what it is we take first-time offenders between the ages of 17 and 25. Those are who we have termed emerging adults, right? So these are people who are, under the eyes of the law, adults, but under the eyes of science aren't, right? The brains aren't fully formed. They are not firing on all cylinders, and they're getting in trouble, right? And so the program was really built out of a client that I had, and I remembered thinking, if someone could just sit this guy down, make him get a job, make him go to school, he would see that he could make money the honest way, and he would stop trying to steal from people, and so, why don't we build that? Why don't we create a program that, rather than holding people back, propels people forward? So Checks Over Stripes is a partnership with Goodwill Industries, with Augusta Technical College, and with America's Remanufacturing Company, which is a private business. And together we screen applicants in the jail as well as on bond. We look at their cases. They go through an assessment period. If they're deemed capable of going through the program, then we get them a job. If they have a job already, we're willing to work with their employer, but we certainly want to make sure that there's no excuse. Like you have a job, either yours or the one that we provide you. They get an instructor at Augusta Tech, and they start for free in their GED program. And then they have the counseling services through Goodwill. And so it's giving people the three main things that we always see that they're lacking. It's usually a lack of economic productivity, a lack of education, and a lack of what we call ecosystemic values, but what my grandma would call home training. So we try to build in them a new way of earning money, a new way of seeing the world, a new way of relating to employers. And in so doing, we make that first time offender a last time offender.
That's right.
I'll tell you, it's not easy to do because we have to determine which cases are appropriate for it, and not so much which cases, but which offenders are appropriate for it, because we need to make sure that people are willing to turn away from what they've been doing.
Okay.
It's got to be someone who's very serious about changing their life, because if they're not, they have so much potential that can just be squandered. And so the program is kind of meant to be for someone that I could put in prison and at least part of the community would not bat an eye. But if I do that, it will make them worse and not better. They're going to go to that trauma factory that is our prison system. They're going to experience trauma. They're probably going to join a gang, and they're going to bring all of that baggage back to our community, right? And so I think my naysayers would call it kumbaya, but I just call it community safety, because if I can change your behavior without felonizing you, meaning without putting all this extra baggage on you, keeping you from getting jobs, keeping you from being productive, if I can do that, the likelihood of you reoffending within the next 3 years is a lot lower. And if you make it 3 years without reoffending, the likelihood of you reoffending ever is very, very low.
Okay. And that's good. But I hear a lot of people talk about the first offenders program is hard. I never had a chance to be a part of it, but it's just like they said, it could be something as a simple technical probation violation or a violation that can get you back. Is that the case?
That's not my experience. Okay. I mean, if you are on first offender for an aggravated assault, then you should expect the prosecutor and the probation officer to be a little more scrutinizing than if you are on first offender for a drug charge, a theft charge, whatever it might be, right? So I say that to say different people's mileage may vary, but in my experience, people aren't getting revoked for technicals alone. You might get reprimanded, you might get locked up, but you actually being revoked under first offender, having your felony put in place, and being resentenced, which are the ramifications of or at least the options available to the prosecutors and to the judge. I don't see that happen very often just on technicals. If you want to stop committing crimes, the first offender program is what you want to do. And we take it a step further by making sure that you have a job and making sure that you have training and making sure that you can finish your education.
Awesome. DA, tell me, why is second chances important to you? Why do you believe in second chances so much?
Because I got them. Because I'm the product of second chances. And I mean, from a faith standpoint, we all are.
Yes.
Right. We all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So I think part of the problem and part of the reason why I ran for district attorney in the first place is because we had a DA's office that only looked one way, that only had one type of background. And so they were trying to make decisions about people's lives over whom they had no understanding, you know, and they weren't seeing the people that they were serving as human beings. And I'll give you a for instance. So I had a client who was about 60 some odd years old, couldn't read or write. Statistically, not being able to read or write, he should have been a felon multiple times over, but he wasn't. He's a hardworking man, a family man, a man of faith. His one problem was he was poor and he couldn't pay to get his license reinstated. And if you drive on a suspended license, they give you $1,000 fine, and then you have to pay that fine before you can get it reinstated. Well, how are you going to pay the fine? You don't go to work. And how does a bricklayer go to work? Well, he drives. And so he gets caught multiple times. And if you do it enough times, it becomes a felony. And I had a prosecutor tell me, as this man's defense attorney, tell me, I'm going to have to offer prison for this guy for driving on a suspended license. Wow. I said, we're talking about driving on a suspended license. And her response was, well, probation's not working. And I'm thinking, if someone would just stop for a second and say, you know what? Why does this guy keep driving on suspended license? Is it because he doesn't make enough money or come from money where he could just pay $1,000 fine and get his license reinstated? Is it possible that if we just pressed pause on this case, timeout, and instead said, you know what? Don't pay us more fine money. Pay your old fine. Get your license reinstated. All right, great. Now you have a license and you're driving. We'll dismiss the case. We don't even need it because we fixed the problem. But the prosecutor's response, because she looked at that man not as her uncle, but as some other, the response was, I guess prison. You know, that is the type of prosecution that I ran to put a stop to. And so that's why we created programs like the pretrial diversion program. No matter how old you are, if you don't have history or you have very old history that's irrelevant to the offense, then you can avail yourself of this program. And we'll basically press pause on your case. We'll ask you to do some things to show accountability. We'll ask you to hit whatever benchmarks we need you to, like, for instance, paying your fine and doing your driver's test. And then we'll dismiss the charge. Awesome. Because it doesn't help me to put this guy in prison. It doesn't help his family. In fact, it makes all of us less safe because the likelihood of him coming out of prison a better person, very low. The likelihood of his family being better off and more stable with him in prison, very low, right? And so when you create desperation, when you create bad circumstances, you breed criminality. That's right. I think for the longest time, I think I say that I will say most prosecutors still aren't admitting this, but there are a good number of us who are. The criminal justice system has been used in a way that has promoted crime, not justice. And so when you start to think through the decisions that you make, you have a better chance to promote justice and promote safety. The problem is it's harder. It's harder to try and figure out who this person is. It's harder to try and think through what can I do to win safety for the community, but also help this person change their behavior. It's particularly hard because there's a lot of people who don't have any interest in doing that in the first place. That's right. They pay lip service to it, but they don't really want to. That's right. They're happy to have our prisons filled. They're happy to have Georgia be the state with the most people on probation. Like that's something to be proud of. That makes no sense at all to me. But again, so now we have prosecutors who are speaking up, and far from being dragged out into the streets from our offices, the people are standing up and saying, no, this is the type of change that we voted for. This is the type of change that we voted for again now. This is what we want happening in our community is we want prosecutors to be reasonable. We want them to be responsible. We want them to not just react to crime, but to be proactive in reducing crime, not just in going and talking to kids, but actually making sure that when you're dealing with their parents, you're doing it in a way that it also promotes safety and community for those kids. All right. So that's what in the classroom, out of the courtroom. All right. So because I see you go in the classroom, you read to the kids. What are you do they even know what a district attorney is when you go there, or how do you introduce yourself to them and the importance of I'll tell you, unfortunately, some of these kids do know who I am and what I do. Okay. I went and spoke to an elementary school for career day, and I had a young girl come up to me and she said, "You sentence my uncle."
Mm.
And sure enough, I knew exactly who she was talking about. So we have to remember, and you can't do this if you don't spend time in the community. You have to remember that the decisions that you make aren't in a vacuum. Like, you don't get to make decisions in the courtroom and they just be in the courtroom. What you do is going to have an impact on the kid at the school down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not responsible in the way you do it, that kid at the school down the road might be coming to the courthouse later.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my frustration with criminal justice is how long we wait to get involved. Because to me, we have all these programs for kids who get in trouble, but we know statistically the kids whose parents are in trouble are the kids who are going to get in trouble. Why don't we put the services in place for the children of incarcerated parents?
Yes.
Why don't we do it there before they do the things that get our attention?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And by ignoring those problems and pretending like we're not having the impact there, we're creating more problems down the line. And it's not just we're creating more work for ourselves. We're actually creating more victims. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to have that conversation with people so that they understand that when I make the decision to dismiss a charge that doesn't have evidence, it's because it's the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do.
That's
when
right.
I decide that we're going to downward depart on a sentence as opposed to handing out a life sentence,
Mm-hmm.
that's because there are other ripple effects that I'm taking into account. When we choose to put someone in a program as opposed to putting them on probation just alone, it's because we want to actually change behavior and because that promotes safety in the future. It's not, I can't make people believe this, that they either are being intellectually honest about what's going on in our society right now, or they're putting their heads in the sand and just pretending like, oh, we can lock our way out of all these problems. You can't lock up addiction. You can't lock up mental illness and fix it. You can't lock up bad behavior to a certain extent because the parole board is letting people out before they get a cup of coffee. So if you're going to make those types of decisions, you have to know what you're doing.
Right.
And that's kind of getting me toward my prison reform argument that I'm happy to make whenever you're ready.
But Samantha saying, she said, and why don't we do something about the juvenile justice system so that when kids do get in trouble, they get the help they need instead of only punishment?
So I will say this: I'm very pleased with some of the moves that we've made in juvenile justice. Particularly, there are services for kids. We have a whole category of the court that deals with children in need of services as opposed to simply delinquency, right? But I'll take your point, which is we need to do more.
Mm-hmm.
The criminal justice system isn't the only part of the community that needs to do more. The parents do, the schools do. I'll tell you, the government generally needs to, because we need to recognize that parents aren't doing their jobs. And so we've got to step in more and meet parents where they are and provide the resources. People say, oh, well, just giving windfalls to people, but really we need to help. And so we created a program called Youth Diversion to the Arts. It's a partnership with the Jesse Norman School of the Arts. It's an after school care program. And basically we said, instead of sending these kids to court, we're going to send them to the after school care program. Mm-hmm. And if they stay with the program and do what they're supposed to, we'll dismiss the charges. And let me tell you, not a single kid who went through that program has reoffended, right? So there are ways to address behavior without punishing.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that there's not sometimes a place for punishment. But especially, like, just think about how you deal with your kids. If you discipline them just for the sake of punishment, they're not going to learn, right? If you discipline them in a way that promotes growth, then they can start to learn. and they can tie their behavior to the consequence, and it makes sense. And the next time that you deal with it, if they're doing the same thing, maybe that you escalate that punishment, right? But you can't just start with, all right, kid's got to get locked up, or kid's got to get his butt beat, whatever it is, right? And so those are the things that we're working on. And I'm looking for more partners, because not every kid wants to do art or dance or theater, whatever it might be. And so we need a sports side of that. We need an early work program side of that. We need internet skills side of that. Like all of these things, I think kids who are fortunate to have safe environments to go home to and loving parents have so many tools at their disposal that these kids that we're seeing a lot don't have. And so we need help. But it can't fall on just your government agencies to do that. The community's got to step up and do it.
All right, tell us, okay, how can the church help? And this is one of my things. Okay, we don't went to prison, and we don't learn. We're out back in society. The majority of us go back due to no support, no job, just no family. Some people don't have family. So since some of the churches are not going back in, since COVID or whatever the case, they don't want to go inside the prison, but we got them out. So how can the church get involved in reentry? How can the church help reduce recidivism a little bit?
I would love to see churches adopt reentrance. And just if every church said, you know what, we're going to devote a certain amount of our blessings and resources for helping keep people accountable, stay on track, and find jobs, we'll help them get transportation, all the different barriers to reentry. If churches will just adopt a few and help in those regards, we would see real-time benefit in the community. Amen. Because most crimes that get my attention are being committed by people who have already been through the system, right? And so if we reduce recidivism, if we reduce the instances of reoffense, we're protecting people. And so that's one side of it, just from the reentry side. But then there's also the issue of the kids. And I was talking to someone the other day. When parents aren't bringing kids to church, what's happening is those kids, they're not getting any faith training at all, but they're also missing out on some vital reading skills, on some reading comprehension, on some vocabulary, on mental awareness. Like there's so many things that you learn in Sunday school that you don't realize you're learning because you're just reading a Bible story, right? Or you're hearing about, whoever. And so this empathy training, there's so much that goes into it that's not happening because parents aren't taking their kids. The parents aren't in church, so why would they take their kids? I think, though, that most parents, whether they are good parents or quote bad parents, all parents want some time away from their kids. So let's step up and say, you know what? We got a couple hours on Sunday, a couple hours on Wednesday nights, whatever it might be. We'll come get them, and adopt the kids from around your surrounding neighborhood and get them in the church, because they sometimes can lead the family in the right way.
That's right.
So when I go to a church and I don't see any children, I'm worried, right?
That's right.
And I mean, that's more often than not, because there's just generations that aren't there. And I'll tell you, there's danger in force feeding religion to people, because they'll naturally rebel from that. But being a safe space and being an open space and going into the community and not expecting the community to just walk into your sanctuary every Sunday are ways that you can do it. that's why I love faith outreach. I love Bishop Peoples to death.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching. I went to the Family Fun Day a few weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and just you're feeding people. You're giving them a safe place to be, a productive thing to do, a fun place to hang out. And through that way, you're showing the love of Christ. And
Amen.
there are a lot of the kids that we're dealing with, because again, if I'm dealing with a kid, they're probably doing something really bad, right? A lot of them are living in hell.
That's right.
They're living in homes where there's no love.
That's
You
right.
show just a little bit, and they're loyal to you, right? But here's the thing: the gangs know that, so the gangs will show you love. And the gangs will put shoes on your feet and clothes on your back and food in your belly. And once you're hooked, and once you're like, these people actually care about me and provide for me more than my parents ever did, then when they say, go spin that block over there, you'll do it, because you're loyal. So we need to be the ones bringing out that love and that loyalty, not waiting for the gangster to take our place.
Amen. What Miss Kelly saying? She said, I love what Mr. Jared is sharing. Every district attorney needs to hear this podcast. The programs need to be instituted in every state. I have a loved one who meets the criteria. Amen. Same for you. Muriel saying, children is missing out on faith skills. Need to bring my 5-year-old grandson more when mom cannot. And that's the truth. Now we got like 5 minutes left, but I want to ask you, for me, and it's what God is doing with me as a compassionate advocate, is to be an advocate not just for the ones that are incarcerated, try to help them, try to give them resources that they need, that they can't have, because I believe once your mindset change, your lifestyle will follow. But also for those that are coming out of prison. So for me, District Attorney Williams, what advice would you give to me as a compassionate advocate when I'm dealing with returning citizens coming out of prison and helping them prepare to society?
You're going to have to be the tough love, because the system itself is going to be tough. There's not going to be any love there, right? You got to be the tough love, because you've got to be looking out for them. But sometimes looking out for them means calling them out when they're not doing what they're supposed to, because that if you don't call them out when they get caught, it's revocation time. It's back in the system that you're trying to protect them from. And so sometimes they don't want that. Sometimes they buck at that, but they'll respect it if you're consistent.
Thank you.
And if they see that you're treating everyone the same, and that you are fair but also firm, I think that creates the type of relationship that they need. It's not what they're going to get from the system. It's just not, because there's too much trust has already been broken when you have that scarlet letter F on your chest, right?
Right.
People aren't believing you or taking you at your word. And so you've got to build that over time, and being consistent, being respectful, being clean when you get tested, being on time to your job, all of those things. If we have a revocation case and I've got a church member that's coming to talk to me, and I've got an employer who's saying this is an invaluable person on my team, and I've got people in the community saying this person does good things, like if that exists, the likelihood of us saying, the best thing for the community is to rip this person away from it is a lot lower than if it's someone who, probation officer hadn't seen them,
Right.
church ain't seen them,
Right.
Their advocate hadn't seen them.
Right.
It's that creates an issue, and I hate revocations because it means that we failed, right? And I take that as collectively we failed, right? Because it means that we didn't actually change behavior. And there are some types of crimes where it's to be expected, right? Relapse is part of recovery. You're going to see that happen. You're going to see people messing up, and there's a certain level of grace that comes with things like that. But when we're talking about violent crimes, or when we're talking about theft crimes that aren't tied to an underlying substance use disorder, like things like that, where you just chose not to do what you're supposed to do, the system doesn't have a lot of empathy for that. And so you being the advocate, you are the last bastion that can give some tough but firm but fair love to that person before it gets to us.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. One last one. We're going to go ahead and leave. Thank you. This is from Samantha again. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you for what you are doing. There is so much pressure on prosecutors to be tough on crime. Thank you for thinking a bit more broadly than that. Amen.
I believe in being smart on crime. So thank you.
Yeah, smart. Well, thank you. Thank you. You gave us a lot of wisdom and information. Really. And we just totally appreciate you and everything that you're doing for our communities. And like Ms. Kelly said, we're just going to share this podcast. We're going to make sure it get into some hands, because you definitely gave us some love and some good word. So thank you all for joining us on tonight, and those who do the replay as well. We just appreciate you. And I do believe in second chances. And just because he is the district attorney, don't mean that he doesn't believe in second chances and want you to get the help that you need. I've shared this before, that I went up to she was a solicitor at the time, and I went up to her, and she constantly looking at me because I kept going in front of her. And she just like, why is Johnson not getting it together? And I wanted to come back and let her know a couple of weeks ago, that I've changed and that I'm doing better, because I knew she tried to help me. It wasn't just her remedy to send me to prison. I sent myself there. But when I tried to reach out to her, she had already passed away, because I wanted to let her know that I do appreciate you. And I knew that she was trying to help me. So you do have people in office that are trying, but sometimes, we got to let the law do what the law does. All right. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all. I will see you in 2 weeks. God bless you. You stay on for just a minute, Mr. Williams.